Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going to be cracking open Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience
Oh, yeah.
by Csikszentmihalyi.
Csikszentmihalyi.
See if we can help you unlock a little more enjoyment in your life. We're going to be exploring why modern life sometimes feels like a happiness trap, what exactly this flow state is all about, and most importantly, how you can actually cultivate it.
It's a fascinating topic and surprisingly relevant, even back in 1990 when the book was published. Csikszentmihalyi was noticing this paradox. We have more material wealth, scientific progress, choices galore, yet people weren't reporting feeling any happier.
Yeah, it's like we got sold this bill of goods, like achieve all these things and you'll be happy. But then we get there and it's like, wait, where's the payoff?
Right. And Csikszentmihalyi didn't just want to complain about it. He went back to the OG happiness expert, Aristotle, who said over 2,000 years ago that happiness is the ultimate goal. All are striving for wealth, beauty, power. It's because we think those things will bring us happiness.
Yeah. Aristotle's onto something. Think about your own life. Aren't most of your actions ultimately driven by a desire for happiness, even if it's disguised as something else? But here we are centuries later, and we still haven't cracked the code. Why do you think that is? Yeah. What was Csikszentmihalyi's take on why we struggle so much with happiness? One of his big points is that we get way too hung up on external factors. Money, status, possessions. We think if I just get that, then I'll be happy. Oh, I've been down that road so many times. It's such a tempting trap. But the thing is, all the research backs up what Csikszentmihalyi was saying. Those external things don't actually move the needle much on long-term happiness. So if it's not about the stuff, then what is it about?
Csikszentmihalyi's big idea is that true happiness comes from within. It's about how we experience the world, and specifically about cultivating a state of flow.
Okay, flow. It sounds a little woo-woo, but I'm willing to hear more. What exactly is this flow state, and how do we get there?
Flow is that feeling of being completely absorbed in an activity, where you lose track of time and self-consciousness. It's that in the zone feeling where you're so focused on what you're doing that everything else fades away.
Like when I'm editing audio for this podcast and suddenly realize 3 hours have vanished.
Yeah.
That kind of flow.
Exactly. And Csikszentmihalyi found that people experience flow in a huge range of activities. Surgeons operating, athletes competing, artists creating, even factory workers.
Factory workers. That's really interesting. It suggests that flow isn't about the specific activity, but more about the mental state you bring to it. So what are the ingredients for a flow-worthy experience? Is there some secret formula?
There are definitely some key elements. First, you need clear goals and immediate feedback. You know what you're trying to achieve, and you can see your progress in real time. Think of it like playing a video game. You have a clear objective, and you get constant feedback on how you're doing.
Makes sense. If you're just wandering around aimlessly, it's tough to get into that zone.
Yeah.
So clear goals, check. What else?
Next, you need a balance between challenge and skill. The activity can't be so easy that you get bored, but not so hard you get frustrated.
It's that sweet spot where your abilities are being stretched just enough to keep you engaged and motivated.
Exactly. And the third key ingredient is complete concentration. In a flow state, all your attention is on the task at hand. You're not thinking about your to-do list or what's for dinner.
So it's almost like a form of mindfulness, being totally present in the moment. But is this flow state only accessible to certain types of people? Can anyone experience this, even in their everyday lives?
Absolutely. Csikszentmihalyi found flow across all sorts of people. He was really emphasizing that our internal state matters more than external conditions.
So it's not about waiting for the perfect job, the perfect hobby. It's about actively choosing to cultivate flow. But how do we control something as slippery as our mental state?
That's where Csikszentmihalyi's information processing model comes in. He saw our consciousness like a constantly flowing river of information. We're bombarded with sensations, thoughts, feelings, impulses every single moment.
Like our minds are in a never-ending newsfeed scroll.
Perfect analogy. And when we aren't managing that flow of information, our minds become disordered and chaotic. He called this state psychic entropy.
Psychic entropy. Sounds intense. What does that actually feel like?
It's that feeling of being totally overwhelmed and scattered, can't focus, thoughts are all over the place. It's like having 20 browser tabs open, your phone buzzing constantly, and trying to remember what you were even doing in the first place.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah.
So how do we fight back against this psychic entropy? How do we bring a little more order to the mental chaos?
Csikszentmihalyi suggested that we can counteract it by consciously directing our attention towards things that create order and, you guessed it, flow It's about curating our mental news feeds instead of just passively consuming whatever pops up.
This is really resonating with me. It's empowering to think we have more agency over our mental state than we realize. But how do we actually go from feeling scattered and overwhelmed to experiencing more flow?
It starts with understanding the difference between pleasure and enjoyment.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the distinction?
Pleasure is passive and fleeting. It's about fulfilling basic biological needs, like eating when you're hungry or taking a hot shower. Enjoyment, on the other hand, is active and engaging. It involves using your skills to overcome challenges and achieve something meaningful.
So pleasure is like instant gratification, while enjoyment is more about the journey and the growth that comes from it.
Exactly. And it's the enjoyment, not just fleeting pleasure, that leads to a deeper sense of fulfillment. Csikszentmihalyi highlights this with the story of a physicist, Professor Meyer Leibniz.
A physicist finding enjoyment. Not exactly the first profession that screams fun and games.
Right. But this professor found a way to inject enjoyment into even mundane parts of his work. He'd tap his fingers in complex rhythmic patterns while riding the train, even figuring out how to represent them musically.
It's like he turned his boring commute into a mental concert.
Exactly. And his story shows us that flow isn't limited to grand pursuits. It's about bringing that mindset to everyday moments. And speaking of everyday moments, let's talk about how we can find flow in our work. I think that's a really good point. It highlights how we can bring that flow mindset to any part of our lives. But when it comes to work, some jobs just seem naturally more flow-friendly than others.
You mean jobs that already have those elements of challenge, creativity, autonomy, built in?
Exactly. Csikszentmihalyi interviewed people from all walks of life, but some of his most compelling insights came from professions like surgery, music, even rock climbing.
Surgery and music, sure. But rock climbing, that seems a little intense for the average person.
It might seem that way. But think about the elements of flow. Climbers have clear goals, reach the summit, they get constant feedback as they climb, assessing the rock face, adjusting their grip, and it's definitely a balancing act between challenge and skill.
Yeah, if it was too easy, I guess it wouldn't be much of a climb.
Right. And the level of concentration required is incredible. When you're clinging to a cliff face hundreds of feet in the air, your mind doesn't really wander much.
It sounds like a recipe for flow, if you're the type who enjoys that kind of adrenaline rush.
And that's an important point. Flow is subjective. What one person finds flow-inducing, another might find terrifying. But for those drawn to rock climbing, it clearly provides a powerful flow experience.
So the takeaway here is it's not about the specific activity. It's about that state of absorption where your skills match the challenge and you're totally present in the moment. What surprised me in the book was that even stuff we usually associate with leisure, like watching TV, doesn't necessarily lead to flow.
That's because it's often a passive activity. You're just sitting there consuming information, not really participating.
Like being on autopilot. Your mind can totally zone out.
Exactly, and that's the opposite of flow. Flow requires active engagement, using your skills to meet a challenge, and getting feedback that helps you adapt and improve.
So even our leisure time needs a dose of challenge and engagement to be truly fulfilling.
Precisely. Csikszentmihalyi suggests that we can apply those same flow principles to how we choose and approach leisure activities. Instead of vegging out, what if you sought out activities that challenge you, engage your mind, let you use your skills?
Turning leisure time into a chance for growth and mastery instead of just escape. I like that.
And when we approach leisure with that mindset, it becomes so much more rewarding. It challenges this idea that we have to compartmentalize our lives. Work is serious and productive. Leisure is just about relaxing and zoning out.
It's like we see these two parts of our lives as totally separate. What if we could bring that flow feeling to both? What if work didn't have to be a grind and leisure wasn't just about escaping reality?
Csikszentmihalyi's work says that's totally possible. That's where this idea of autotelic experience comes in.
Autotelic experience. Sounds a little academic. Can you break that down for me?
It's actually pretty simple. Autotelic means something that's intrinsically rewarding, something we do for its own sake, not for some external reward.
So like doing a crossword puzzle because you enjoy the challenge, not because you're trying to win a prize or impress someone.
Exactly. Or playing music because you love creating sounds, not because you're trying to become famous.
It's about finding those activities that light you up from the inside, that you're drawn to simply because they're enjoyable and engaging.
Right. And Csikszentmihalyi argues that cultivating these autotelic experiences is key to a more fulfilling life. When we find those things that are intrinsically rewarding, we're less reliant on external validation and more likely to experience flow.
It's like finding those internal sources of motivation and joy. Instead of chasing external carrots all the time, he even suggests that work can become an autotelic experience.
He does. It sounds crazy, but remember Joe, the factory worker from earlier. He found flow in the challenge of solving problems and mastering his craft. He wasn't doing it for the paycheck. He was doing it because he genuinely loved the process.
So even in jobs that seem repetitive or mundane, there's still potential for flow and enjoyment.
Absolutely. It's about finding those aspects of the work that you find intrinsically rewarding and focusing your attention on them.
It's less about changing jobs, more about changing our relationship to our work.
You got it. And it's not just work. Csikszentmihalyi talks about how we can cultivate this autotelic mindset in all areas of life. It starts with paying attention to what we're doing and noticing when we feel that sense of flow, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Like when we're lost in a good book, or engrossed in a creative project, or having a deep conversation with a friend.
Exactly. And once we start noticing those moments, we can intentionally create more of them.
So actively seeking out activities and experiences that bring us joy and challenge us in a meaningful way.
And being present in the moment, paying attention to the process, letting go of attachment to the outcome.
It sounds a lot like mindfulness.
Absolutely. Flow and mindfulness go hand in hand. And if we find activities we genuinely enjoy, even the mundane parts, like practicing scales on the piano or editing a podcast, become less of a chore.
Because the intrinsic reward of the activity itself fuels our motivation and keeps us engaged. This is such a powerful shift in perspective. It's not about waiting for happiness to magically appear. It's about creating it in our daily lives.
And that's what makes Csikszentmihalyi's work so compelling. It's not just theory, it's a practical guide to living a more fulfilling life.
Okay, so we've covered flow in work and leisure, and even making mundane tasks more enjoyable. But what about our relationships with other people? Does flow play a role there?
It absolutely does. Csikszentmihalyi dedicates a whole section of his book to the dynamics of flow in relationships.
So can we actually experience flow with other people?
Absolutely. Think about those times you're having a deep conversation with a friend, and you completely lose track of time.
Or when you're working on a project with a team, and everyone's ideas are flowing, and you feel that synergy.
Those are great examples of flow in relationships. And just like any flow experience, certain conditions make it more likely.
What are the ingredients for creating flow in our relationships?
First and foremost, you need shared goals. Working towards something together, whether it's raising a family, building a business, or just enjoying a shared hobby, creates a powerful sense of purpose and unity.
Like having a common mission you're both invested in.
Precisely. That shared mission provides a framework for challenges and feedback. You're supporting each other, learning from each other, pushing each other to grow.
Sounds like a recipe for flow A&D, a deeper connection. What else is important?
Clear communication is key. Being able to openly and honestly express your thoughts and feelings builds safety and trust, which allows for deeper engagement.
It's like being able to be your authentic self without fear of judgment.
Exactly. That vulnerability creates connection and intimacy. And just like any flow experience, there needs to be a balance between challenge and skill. It can't be too easy or too one-sided.
So it's not about hanging out with people who are exactly like us. It's about finding relationships that push us outside our comfort zones and help us grow.
You got it. It's about finding people we can learn from and be inspired by. People who challenge our assumptions and make us think in new ways.
So flow in relationships isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about finding connections that challenge us, support us, and help us become our best selves. This is making me rethink my whole idea of what a good relationship is.
And Csikszentmihalyi even suggests that conflict can be a catalyst for flow in relationships.
Wait, conflict? That can actually be a good thing.
It can, as long as it's approached in a healthy way. Constructive conflict, where both sides are listening and trying to understand each other's views, can lead to greater understanding, growth, and even deeper connection.
It's about turning conflict into an opportunity for learning and growth, instead of something to avoid.
Exactly. Being willing to be challenged, to be vulnerable, and to grow together is a key part of creating flow in relationships.
So we've got flow in work, leisure, and relationships. Are we missing anything?
Actually, yes. We haven't touched on flow in the context of solitude.
Solitude. That seems like the opposite of flow. Isn't flow all about being engaged and connected, whether it's to a task or to other people?
That's a common misconception. Csikszentmihalyi highlights how solitude, if approached intentionally, can be a powerful catalyst for flow.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. How can being alone lead to flow?
It might seem counterintuitive, But when we create the right conditions, solitude lets us disconnect from external distractions, delve deeper into our thoughts and feelings, and connect with our inner world.
It's like giving our minds the space and quiet they need to wander, explore, and create.
Exactly. And that kind of undirected exploration can be incredibly fertile ground for flow. Think of activities like reading, writing, meditation, or spending time in nature.
Those are all things we can do alone. That can be incredibly absorbing and rewarding.
Precisely. And when we approach solitude with intention, it can be a powerful tool for personal growth, creativity, and even spiritual insight.
So it's not about isolating ourselves from the world. It's about using solitude as a time for introspection, reflection, and connection with our deeper selves.
You got it. Csikszentmihalyi emphasizes that being comfortable with solitude is essential for a fulfilling life.
Because even in our busy, connected lives, we all need those moments of quiet and stillness to recharge and reconnect.
Absolutely. And those moments of solitude can be just as flow-inducing as the moments we spend engaged with others or immersed in a challenging task.
This is making me rethink my whole perspective on solitude.
Me too. It's not about being lonely or isolated. It's about choosing to embrace the power of being alone.
But I'm also curious, how does all of this relate to the bigger picture? Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow on a cultural level, right?
He does. He explores how culture itself can be seen as a system for creating flow experiences.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. How can something as big and complex as culture be related to flow?
Think of it this way. Cultures provide rituals, traditions, art forms, and even games, all designed to engage our attention, challenge our skills, and provide opportunities for enjoyment.
So like a cultural dance or a traditional craft.
Exactly. These activities often have built-in structures and rules that create a framework for flow. They require a certain level of skill and mastery and provide opportunities for feedback and growth.
It's like culture is a giant playground for flow experiences passed down through generations.
And one of the examples that really struck me was the ritual of the Shuswap tribe in British Columbia.
What does they do?
Every 25 to 30 years, the entire village would move to a different part of their territory.
Wow, a whole village migration. Why would they do that?
It was all about maintaining a sense of challenge and novelty. By moving, the villagers were forced to learn about the land, adapt their skills, and find new ways to thrive.
A way to prevent stagnation and keep things interesting.
Exactly. And it ensured that each generation had the opportunity to experience the challenges and rewards of adapting to a new environment. They built flow into the very fabric of their culture.
That's brilliant. It's like they engineered their culture to promote flow.
And Csikszentmihalyi points out that many indigenous cultures have similar rituals and practices designed to create flow experiences and prevent boredom and complacency. It's a fascinating perspective on how culture shapes our experience of the world.
So it's not just about the individual pursuit of flow. It's also about creating a culture that supports and encourages flow on a larger scale. This is making me think about how we often talk about the pursuit of happiness as if it's this elusive thing we have to chase after. But what if happiness isn't something we find, but something we create?
That's a powerful insight, and that's ultimately what flow is all about. It's not a formula for happiness. It's a framework for understanding how to create more enjoyment and meaning in our lives.
It's about taking ownership of our experience and actively designing a life that's filled with flow.
And that's something available to all of us, regardless of our circumstances. What do you think? Have we covered everything?
I think we've explored just about every nook and cranny of flow, from the challenges of modern life to the power of solitude and even the role of culture. We've really gone deep.
I agree. But I think there's one more crucial element of cultivating flow that we haven't discussed directly: the role of values.
Values. Tell me more. How do they fit into all of this?
Well, Csikszentmihalyi argues that flow is not just about seeking pleasure or escaping reality. It's about aligning our actions with our deeply held values. When we engage in activities that are consistent with our values, we're more likely to find them intrinsically rewarding, and therefore more likely to experience flow.
That makes sense. If we're doing things that feel meaningful and purposeful, we're naturally going to be more engaged and invested in the experience. But how do we actually connect our values to our everyday actions?
It starts with identifying those values. What truly matters to you? What do you want your life to stand for? Once you have a clear understanding of your values, you can start to make choices that are aligned with them.
So it's about asking ourselves, does this activity, this job, this relationship reflect what I truly value?
Exactly. And it might mean making some tough choices. It might mean saying no to things that drain your energy or don't align with your values, even if they're things that society tells you should be important to you.
It's about having the courage to live authentically, even if it means going against the grain.
And that authenticity is a key ingredient in cultivating flow. When we're living in alignment with our values, we're more likely to find joy and meaning in our everyday experiences, even the challenging ones.
So it's not just about seeking out flow experiences, it's about creating a life that is conducive to flow, a life that reflects what we truly care about. I love that.
And that's a powerful takeaway. It's about taking ownership of our lives and making conscious choices that lead us towards greater fulfillment and joy.
This has been such an incredible exploration of flow, and I feel like I've learned so much about how to bring more of it into my own life.
It's been a pleasure diving deep into these ideas with you.
And a huge thanks to Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi for his groundbreaking work. But before we wrap up, I have a final question for you. If flow is so beneficial, why don't we experience it more often? What are the barriers that prevent us from living a life filled with flow?
That's a great question, and one that I think we all grapple with. There are many potential barriers, both internal and external. Sometimes it's fear that holds us back. We might be afraid of failure, of judgment, of stepping outside our comfort zones.
Yeah, it's easier to stick with what's familiar, even if it's not fulfilling.
Exactly. And sometimes it's our own inner critic, that voice that tells us we're not good enough, not talented enough, not worthy of experiencing flow.
Oh, that inner critic can be so loud. How do we quiet that voice down?
It takes practice. But one of the best ways is to cultivate self-compassion, to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a dear friend.
And to remember that we don't have to be perfect to experience flow.
Exactly. Flow is about the journey, not the destination. It's about embracing the process, imperfections, and all.
So what can our listeners do, starting today, to overcome these barriers and move towards a life filled with more flow?
I think the most important step is to simply become aware of those moments when you feel a sense of flow. Pay attention to what you're doing, how you're feeling, and what conditions are present.
Like keeping a flow journal.
That's a great idea. And once you start to notice those flow moments, you can start to intentionally create more of them.
By setting clear goals, finding activities that challenge and engage us, and cultivating a mindset of mindfulness and self-compassion.
Exactly. And remember, flow is a practice, not a destination. It's something we cultivate over time, with patience and persistence.
This has been such an enlightening conversation, and I feel so inspired to start incorporating these ideas into my own life. I hope our listeners feel the same way.
And you. It's been a pleasure sharing this deep dive with you and our listeners.
And that concludes our deep dive into flow, the psychology of optimal experience. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. It's amazing how much there is to unpack when it comes to this idea of flow.
It really is. It's a rich concept. And even though Csikszentmihalyi's book was written a while back, these ideas feel more relevant than ever.
Totally. Last time we were talking about how even solitude can be a source of flow and how crucial it is to be comfortable with our own company.
Yeah, it's about creating those conditions for deep introspection, focus, and creative exploration, something that's been practiced for centuries by artists, writers, and spiritual seekers.
Totally. But I'm curious, the book also talks about flow in the context of something else that's been around for centuries, culture. And that's where I get a little lost. How can something as big and complex as culture be related to flow?
Well, think about it this way. Cultures provide rituals, traditions, art forms, and games, all designed to engage our attention, challenge our skills, and offer opportunities for enjoyment.
So like a cultural dance or a traditional craft.
Exactly. Those activities often have built-in structures and rules that create a framework for flow. They require a certain level of skill and mastery and provide opportunities for feedback and growth.
It's like culture is this giant playground for flow experiences, passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah, and one of the examples that really stuck with me was the ritual of the Shuswap tribe in British Columbia.
What did they do?
Every 25 to 30 years, the entire village would move to a different part of their territory.
Wow, that's a serious commitment to shaking things up. What was the purpose of that?
It was all about maintaining a sense of challenge and novelty. By moving to a new location, the villagers were forced to learn about the land, adapt their skills, and find new ways to thrive.
So it was a way to prevent stagnation and complacency,
Yeah.
to force them to grow and learn.
Exactly. And it ensured that each generation had the opportunity to experience the challenges and rewards of adapting to a new environment. They quite literally built flow into their culture.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about the individual pursuit of flow, it's also about creating a culture that supports and encourages flow on a larger scale.
Absolutely. And that's something we can all contribute to in our own ways. by seeking out those activities that challenge and engage us, by fostering creativity in our communities. By supporting the arts and traditions that bring us joy, we can help to create a more flow-friendly world for ourselves and for others.
This is making me think about how we often talk about the pursuit of happiness, as if it's this elusive thing we have to chase after. But what if, and maybe Csikszentmihalyi is hinting at this, happiness isn't something we find, it's something we create.
That is a powerful insight, and that's what's so compelling about flow. It's not a formula for happiness, it's a framework for understanding how we can create more enjoyment and meaning in our lives.
It's about taking ownership of our experience and making choices that lead us towards a life that's rich with those flow experiences.
Exactly, and that's something that's available to everyone. Regardless of their circumstances or background, it's a matter of understanding these principles and then putting them into practice in our own unique ways.
This has been an absolutely incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools for approaching life with more intention, curiosity, and joy. What about you?
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Csikszentmihalyi's work is truly a gift.
It really is. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the world of flow, the psychology of optimal experience. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did.
And remember, flow is a practice. It's about finding what brings you joy and making those small, intentional choices each day to cultivate more of it in your life.
So go out there, experiment, and discover what puts you in that flow state. And don't forget to share your experiences with us. We'd love to hear about your own journey towards a more fulfilling and flow-filled life. And that concludes our deep dive into flow, the psychology of optimal experience. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time on the Deep Dive Shop.
Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks so much for listening. If you want to get the book for yourself, use the link in the description. If you're looking to level up your income, schedule a one-on-one with me to see if what I do might be right for you. Remember, like if you like the content and share so we can all become more book buff and life smart.